Hi everyone, in today's video I want to talk to you all about finding inspiration, the need for inspiration, the challenges with finding inspiration, how to find original inspiration, how to use inspiration, something everyone needs but everyone also can have hang-ups about. And so I want to talk to you about my approach to finding inspiration. Right, so before we go digging into things like where to find inspiration and actually how to physically use that inspiration, I want to talk firstly about the need for inspiration. We often have this vision of an artist as being someone who can sit at a blank sheet of paper and ideas sort of come to them from the ether and then they start drawing and it's all this sort of magical, mystical, kind of slightly wild creative process. But I don't know about you, but I don't know a single artist who works in that way. I think everyone has a method and every artist is using some form of references. And that goes back throughout all of time. The first only original piece of art really ever created were the first cave paintings. And from that point, artists have been looking to other artists for inspiration. Matisse had tens of thousands of objects in his collections, from primitive art to outsider art to collect work by other artists, to textiles, to ceramics, pieces that feature in his art, pieces that just informed his art. He was a collector as well as an artist. The great masters learnt by copying. Everyone still, your technical portrait painters learn by spending a year copying Titian. Take Francis Bacon, totally different artist, but if you heard this idea of Francis Bacon's studio room floor was covered in sheets of paper, printouts of things, words and writing about things. He called it his compost. He actually stood painting on his inspiration. His floor was covered in reference materials from other artists. And this idea, therefore, that we should try and not use inspiration and we should just look in a blank box is a bit ridiculous. But there are ways of using inspiration. So there's a famous quote from Picasso, and he said, "Good artists copy, great artists steal." And that doesn't mean stealing an overall look of something. What he really means by that is it's the idea that you steal the starting point and you make it something completely your own. You take the idea, but you transform it into something completely original to you. That's the idea. If you just stand there and you just present to me another Matisse cutout, you're a good artist, you copy. But if you want to do something great, you have to steal the idea and you have to reinvent the idea. So that's why I think this whole topic of finding inspiration is so important and so relevant. But it's definitely a really difficult topic because I think people run into all sorts of kind of challenges, personal challenges or external challenges. So firstly, the idea of copying. No artist wants to be copied and no artist wants to feel like they're copying. We all want to feel original. And whether that's something consciously or unconsciously, it can really put you off looking at things because you're worried that you're going to absorb something and then that's suddenly going to feed into your work. And I have many artist friends who have this issue where they create something totally what they perceive as in a vacuum and it just happens at the end to look quite like someone else's work. And then you have a whole emotional internal battle about, God, is that something to do with me? Or there's this fear that if I'm a good artist, shouldn't I just be able to come up with something? There's this fear of insecurity around, why do I need this amount of inspiration? Why can't I just come up with an idea? What's wrong with me? So I think they're the big blockers that stop people using inspiration. And in that process, you stop yourself in your tracks. You never enable yourself to find your own aesthetic because you stop right at the very beginning, which every artist needs to go through. So what I want to talk about in this video is where to find inspiration. What sources can you use that help you avoid falling into those traps of copying or lacking originality? And what sources should you avoid? And then some tips on how I personally choose to look at inspiration. This is very much my own perspective, and so I'd love to hear yours. I'd love to know, what do you think about finding inspiration? What sources do you use? What do you think are the challenges? Do you disagree with anything I'm saying? And do let me know in the comments. So first up, where to avoid looking for inspiration. So I will start with maybe the obvious, but social media. Avoid Instagram, avoid Pinterest as places to look to for inspiration. As much as I love these, I think the issue is you are being fed an algorithm, and if you are seeing things that are popular, so are a lot of other people. And what you'll find yourself doing is, as much as you will like those images you're seeing, is kind of being fed down a trend without necessarily getting to ever choose the trend. You've not necessarily had a load of free choice. And I think across social media, across Pinterest, the same actually with any current books, any books, newly published books on things, you are removing your ability to stumble upon something different. You're being fed a trend, an idea that is already going well. And if you spend too much time looking at things like that, unconsciously you will absorb ideas, and unconsciously you may start having your art look and feel like someone else's at the moment. And so the way I avoid it is, personally, I use Pinterest only to save things down from other websites. I don't use Pinterest to find images within Pinterest. Or on social media, I actually just don't follow many accounts. And that's not because I don't admire loads of other artists or follow or admire what people are doing, but I am worried about what I'll see. I'm worried that what I'll see will feed into my mind, and what I will end up creating will be inspired by it, and I don't want that to happen. So I am worried, and I'm protecting my sort of unconscious. So they're the places I would avoid. So where would I look? Now, I think there are loads of places to look for inspiration. So I just want to go through my top 5 places that I look for inspiration. And kick off with my absolute favourite, all-time number 1, is secondhand bookshops. Now, in every single one of these parts of inspiration hunting, what I'm trying to create is that stumble upon opportunity. The opportunity that you'll come across something you've never seen before, something you wouldn't think about, something outside of your day-to-day. And secondhand bookshops are an amazing place to do that. So I have loads of books here because I want to show you some of my favourite kinds of finds from secondhand bookshops. And the first one is auction catalogues. Maybe this is a UK thing, I don't know, please tell me. But in a load of our kind of charity bookshops, secondhand bookshops, you'll find a load of old auction catalogues. And the great thing about auction catalogues, I'll try to show you, is they are so image heavy, because they are selling pieces here. They're all selling objects. And so you can get the most incredible sort of reproductions of amazing images. So this one clearly is an auction catalogue from a sale of Indian miniatures paintings, and amazing book. Or this one here, see, this is from, again, this is this Simon Ray. Look at these. So these are just, even if you just get one image through these of items, these are just amazingly heavy image pieces. And each of these ones here, and you can tell here, obviously they've got a bit of a thing for Indian miniatures, and you know I have quite a thing for Indian miniatures. But even these, like, look at that table. I mean, what a motif that would make in an embroidery. These ones, auction catalogues here, I've got more here, or this one here, this tribal arts and antiquities, which is sort of an amazingly rich catalogue, absolutely hundreds of images. These each £3 for each of these. You know, auction catalogues are just an incredible source. The second one then, I think, is to go to secondhand bookshops outside of your kind of locale. Whether you're travelling overseas, if you can go to a secondhand bookshop in another city, you will be amazed what you find. So these magazines I have here, I picked up at a secondhand bookshop in Venice, and they are all in Italian, and I do not speak Italian, so I cannot read. But I don't need to love everything in the magazine. I just need to find something I love, one thing. And for this one, this was this section here. And these paintings I adore. Look at these colours, the borders, the strength of them. They feel to me like embroideries waiting to happen. And what a stumble upon. I would never have come across those if I hadn't gone into that secondhand bookshop in Venice. Or likewise, say here, this one just has an amazing section at the back, all on Matisse's cutouts. But they're images of Matisse's cutouts that I have not seen before, pieces I haven't come across. And again, it's these triggers for different ideas that I may not have otherwise. Or this, look at this one. This is a Scandinavian paintings from a house. And look at these paintings. I mean, amazing stuff. So go internationally, look for pieces. If you're in another city, have it always be on your to-do list. I must go to that secondhand bookshop. And then don't worry about being able to necessarily understand it. So this one here I picked up in a used bookshop in Hay on Wye, which is, for any used bookshop lovers, is like heaven. You have to go to Hay because it's just full of them. And this is, again, just full of these incredible Mughal miniature paintings. Or you can get more wordy ones, like this English popular art one here, which is very word heavy, but basically incredible book because it goes through here. It just goes through loads of different kinds of popular art. By popular art, it sort of means folk art. And so, say there's carving, giants and marionettes, ship figureheads, roundabouts and rocking horses, shops and inn signs, tombstones, crooks and sticks, presents and love tokens, sailors and apprentices' work, gingerbread stamps. Like, I want to now go look into every single one of those topics. I only really need from this entire book the contents page. So, I mean, I could go on all day about secondhand bookshops, as you can probably tell, but it is absolutely heaven, and I think get into the habit of going to them, get into the habit of enjoying them. So second up is museum and gallery archives. Now, as much as I would love to be able to visit every museum in the world, I imagine, much like you, it's just not possible. And one of the great things about the time we are living in now and the digitisation of life is how many museums internationally now have their collections online, and collections that you wouldn't even see by visiting the museum. So take, for example, the British Museum. They have about 1/10, I believe, of their collection on display in the museum, but their entire collection is digitally available in the archives. So if you want to spend quite a bit of time finding ideas, finding inspiration, you can spend hours, days looking at these museum archives. And some of my particular favourites are, well, as I said, British Museum, V&A, they have amazing digitised online collections. But then outside of that, there's the Winterthur Museum, amazing for needlework. Philadelphia Museum of Art, they have an incredible textiles collection, which I would never have known about. There's the International Folk Art Museum, the ones in Santa Fe, they have amazing online collections, which you have to spend a lot of time looking at. And so the way I would approach museum archives is you kind of have to be quite methodical about it. It's almost like a job. So when I was doing things like the British Museum one, I didn't want to miss objects. So I would go onto the collection, I would type in textiles, and then I would go through, say, 10 pages, have a little notebook, and I'd note down what pages I'd done. I would then take those images and then I put them to my Pinterest. So that's the sort of way I use Pinterest. And if you go to my Pinterest account, you'll see I've got an inspiration board. And in there, if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the period of time when I was going through the British Museum archives, because it is chock-a-block with loads of images all linking through to the archives. So third up, which feeds really well from that, is Google reverse image search. Now, if you are out and about and you see an object you like, for example, I went up to the Fitzwilliam Museum in Cambridge, and they have an amazing collection of English pottery. And there was this plate, I'll show you to the side, with these two lions on it, which I absolutely loved. So firstly, off the back of it, I wanted to find out more about the object. There was no information at the museum because they have such a big pottery collection about this one object. And secondly, I wanted to find other things like it. If I liked that, I want to see other ideas. So I can take that one image, take a photo of it, and put it into Google reverse image search. And suddenly, not only do I find out all the information I want about that object, but it leads me down to lots of other items I might like. And actually, interestingly, that plate ended up becoming inspiration for an etching that I did when I was taking an etching course earlier this year, all about heraldic symbols. I wanted to do this series about heraldic symbols. So it's really interesting how going from one object into Google reverse image search, finding out about that object, and then seeing how that might feed through into your own creations. And finally, and it links really through to all the other ones we've talked about, is online auction archives. So as I showed you earlier from the Secondhand bookshop, I have loads of secondhand magazines and auction catalogues. But these days, loads of auctions don't produce catalogues anymore, or you won't necessarily see all the catalogues from previous auctions, and items that have been sold have ended up going into private collections and you are never going to see that item. So looking at old sales of textiles or other things will help you to find items and ideas you've never come across otherwise. And so just an example, I'm going to show you the textiles collections from the sales of Sir Alistair MacAlpine. And there were 2 sales that Bonhams did, I think in around 2007, I'm sure on the screen now, I'll correct myself. But they have the most incredible collections of textiles. He was a massive textile collector, and so when you scroll through all those sorts of inspiration, you will come across lots of items, and then you can take one of those items, you can go into Google reverse image search, you can find more items like it, you can save them down to your Pinterest, you can save them in other ways, but it's a way of kick-starting ideas, and again, we're generating this whole stumble upon idea. So look at old auctions. You can just go onto big auction houses' websites, go onto Christie's, search something like vernacular art, outsider art, go find an auction from early 2000s and just see what happens. You know, a lot of the time you will find nothing, but all you need is one gem to make the whole thing worthwhile. So those are my favourite places to look for inspiration. But when you're looking for inspiration, there are a few tips I'd have. So firstly, step outside your medium. I'm a textile artist. I don't just therefore look at textiles, and if anything, I try to avoid looking at textiles. I think a lot of my inspiration comes from ceramics, decorated ceramics, so don't feel like you have to stick in your medium. Secondly, don't think you have to like everything about an image. Don't find something where you think, oh, I love that item and I love that colour and I love the layout. Just look for one thing in one image. It could be that you don't really like the subject matter or nothing's in the way you like, but you really love the way they've combined certain colours. Do not try and like everything about an image. Just find one thing you like, and that will actually almost become better inspiration, because you will then take that motif but apply it in a totally different way. Third, don't overthink why you like things. I think we can get hung up on what we think we should like and what we actually like, and what's highbrow, what's lowbrow. You know, you can get hung up on, why do I like this, and get all profound on things. Don't. I think just try be as surface level as you can. It's like going into a room in an art gallery and saying, oh, I like that painting. Don't look at who the painter was. Don't look at whether they're someone who's known. Just choose something because it speaks to you. Don't overthink it. And finally, you do not need to have a use for the inspiration yet. Just saving something down or finding a way to keep something, you never know when that idea will come back to you. As an example, I'm stitching an embroidery at the moment, and I'll show you a picture of it. I haven't got it with me, but on the embroidery I have at the bottom of it some fish over a pond, and I wanted a way of kind of representing that. And it took me back to a couple of years ago, going to the Metropolitan Museum in New York, and they have this amazing section of Egyptian art and recreated Egyptian panels, where I had absolutely loved the way they had done the fish underwater. I will show you a picture as well. That idea has been in my mind for 2 years, and finally 2 weeks ago I have used it within my own work. So you don't have to know when you're going to use it. The idea is there, it will come back to you. Save it, store it, and you never know when it will come back up. That's all my tips on where to find inspiration, and I'm going to follow this video up with a part 2 about then how I would go about using inspiration. And that's where I'm going to dig into all the idea of what am I doing with all these dog-eared sheets of paper? What am I doing with all these packs of random patterns? That's what we're going to come on to on the next video. which will follow up in a week or two. As ever, please do let me know your comments. I really, really love reading your perspective on topics like this, because this is just my approach and I don't really speak to that many other artists about their approach, so I'd love to know what you do.